In my first video on the Insta360 Ace Pro, I did a comparison versus the DJI Action 4 and the GoPro Hero 12, but because I was doing a comparison video, I wasn't able to dive into all the features of the Ace Pro. So I told you guys, throw your questions, your comments down below, and I will get them answered in a future video. And today's that future video. Also, today I just finished the overheating test between these three cameras, and in this video will be the overheating results of these three cameras against each other at 4K 120. Who wins? Who can handle the heat the best? The results were surprising. I was actually surprised by the results of the overheating test. First thing though that you guys mentioned was a no audio test. Where was the audio comparison between these three cameras? They're action cameras. They all sound like action cameras, but here is what the audio sounds like coming straight out of each camera. And then here's what it sounds like with a little bit of wind added. All right, here is an audio test of these three cameras, just the built-in microphones. So the GoPro Hero 12, how does the GoPro Hero 12 sound right now? There's very little wind and there's very little noise. There's some sprinklers going off behind the camera, but if I'm facing this way, you probably won't hear those sprinklers. The DJI Action 4, how does the DJI Action 4 sound? Just the built-in audio and those two little microphones on the front of the Action 4. It usually sounds pretty decent in this scenario. Now the Ace Pro. Now the Ace Pro has a mode that is trying to focus on the audio that is in front of it. And in this kind of situation where you're talking to camera, that's kind of the mode that you would want to be. But all three of these have wind reduction modes. So we'll throw those wind reduction modes on, and then we'll test it with a touch of wind. All right, so now these three cameras, I'm gonna get it so the wind is kind of coming right behind the camera and I'm in front of it. That gives them the best shot. The GoPro Hero 12 right now, I am going 10 miles per hour, simulating 10 miles per hour of wind. It's not that much wind, but how does the GoPro sound? The DJI Action 4, 10 miles per hour of wind. How does the DJI Action sound in a little bit of wind? And now the Ace Pro, again, still hanging at 10 miles an hour. All these cameras are gonna do pretty decent right around this zone in like the 10 mile an hour range. But let's get moving a little quicker and simulate something more like we're mountain biking or we're skateboarding. All right, now going 15 miles an hour. How does the GoPro Hero 12 sound in 15 mile an hour wind? Now, if you're on a mountain bike, this isn't that fast. The DJI Action 4, how does it sound in 15 miles per hour of wind? Same thing, like maybe you're skateboarding, you're mountain biking, you're doing something where you're going 15 miles an hour. And now the Ace Pro. How does the Ace Pro sound? I'm holding 15 miles an hour. How does the Ace Pro do at reducing the wind noise? Kind of all that. Usually none of these cameras do very well in this test. They're just not great with audio and wind. If it's windy, these cameras usually break down pretty well. Okay, so that is how the audio sounds out of these cameras with a little bit of wind added. I think they all struggle quite a bit, but the Ace Pro does surprisingly well. But Gabe Gonzaga also asked, what does external audio capabilities look like for the Ace Pro? Thinking about the DJI mic via USB-C or Rode Mic Go set. Can I also hook up a mini mic on the unit itself with a vlog housing or like a cage? Yes to all of those things. The Ace Pro has this little bit, which is their audio adapter, and you just pop off the door that covers the SD card and USB-C port, plug that bit in there, and then boom, I now have a 3.5 millimeter audio port, and I still have that USB-C port. So for Shreddy MC Skate, who asked, can you hook up the Rode Wireless to it while charging? Yes. And to Swan in 1794, I just have one question, can it record while charging? Yes, all of those things possible just with their audio adapter. Now their cold shoe mount, their cage system for this is kind of interesting. They have their quick release mount, which has both GoPro feet and quarter 20 on bottom of it, but it also has a hidden rail system in here. So if I link this to the bottom of the camera, I then take this little L bracket that has a cold shoe mount on the side, and with the feet flipped down on this quick release mount, there's like a rail system that slides into. And just like that, without a cage, it kind of gives you this like L bracket thing for cold shoes, so I can mount any sort of microphone there, and I plug it in on that side. Next up is Man Plus River says, great intro. Next, I'd love a video testing freezing / overheating and battery life. So I actually just completed those tests, and the results, like I said, quite interesting. First up, the battery life between these three is interesting because, thumb screws, hang on. The battery life test is always interesting because the company's battery life tests are always done at 1080, and I don't think many people are shooting these cameras at 1080. They're shooting them at 4K. So at 4K 30, on the Hero 12, we saw 84 minutes of battery life at 4K 30. On the Ace Pro, 86 minutes of battery life, so slightly better than the GoPro Hero 12. And then the Action 4 comes in at 110 minutes of battery life. So 84, 86, and 110 minutes, just purely battery life. Now, I did talk in my initial video about fast charging, and the Ace Pro and the Action 4 both support fast charging while the GoPro does not. The GoPro takes between 2 and 3 hours to charge a single battery. It's right there on their website. While these guys both have fast charging. So the Action 4 can go from 0% to 80% in 18 minutes, and the Ace Pro can do 0 to 80% in 22 minutes. And then the Action 4 takes 49 minutes for a full charge, and the Ace Pro takes 46 minutes for a full charge. So, I mean, fast charging in general, it's gonna save you a ton of time. But what about overheating? How do these cameras do when you throw them in 4K 120 and you just let them run? Yeah, the GoPro made it between 22 and 28 minutes. 22 was the worst I saw, 28 was the best I saw, but 28 minutes at 4K 120 is the best that I saw out of the Hero 12. Now the Action 4, on the other hand, made it to 64 minutes at 4K 120, which is, you know, that's a significant jump. And where does the Ace Pro fall in this range? 28 minutes, 64 minutes, and 67 minutes on the Ace Pro. And it didn't overheat, the battery died. So both of these were battery die, not overheating. Both good questions. Ryan Shepard 2536 asked, how durable is that flip-up screen? Can it live up to the action camera abuse it will take? I asked Insta360 about this because I was like, hey, a flip-up screen on an action camera, like, could that break? Like, what's the possibilities just from me using it normally that it's gonna break? And they told me that this flip-up screen in their testing, like they're like testing mechanical rig, they open and close it 10,000 times and it doesn't ever break on them. That's their like quality assurance test, is they take a bunch of these, they put them in a machine and it just opens and closes it 10,000 times, which I don't think I'll ever be able to do it 10,000 times. But then user LE6F, there's a lot going on there. He says, can you try dropping the camera with the screen open and seeing if it will break? No, I'm not gonna do that. Like if Insta360 wants to send me a separate camera that's not the one that I'm running around with, I will totally go drop it and I will do like a drop, like an abuse test to see how much it would take to break that screen. I will say though, if I'm in a situation where I think like, oh, I'm gonna go do something like super gnarly, I would definitely close the screen. Like, this is my camera that I spend money on, I would wanna protect it, and I would know that if it's up like that and it slams, yes, there's a much higher chance of it breaking than if it was closed. When it is closed, it is locked in place, and you have to press these two little buttons to lift that up. So if you have it mounted like on a motorcycle or outside on your plane wing and you're going very, very fast, you don't want wind, I think, catching it, or maybe if you were like surfing or wakeboarding, something like that, you wouldn't want that up, I think, because like then I can imagine there being like a lot of torque on the screen, like wind sitting there like shaking the camera. So in those scenarios, that's where you would want to have it down and clicked in place. All right, next up is Ghost Rider ADV. Can the lens unscrew like the GoPro if it gets scratched? No, it is non-removable lens cover, which I was bummed about also. Like, it was one of the first things I said to them was like, oh, the lens cover isn't removable, because I made a big stink when the Hero 8 came out and you couldn't remove the lens cover. So like, this piece on the GoPro, that pops off on the Osmo Action. I can rotate it like that. I can spin this piece off. So like, that's the lens in there, and this is just a little cover. So I screw this on. If I was to scratch this, if I was to damage it, break it, I can just swap this out for a new one. User replaceable lens cover. And when I brought this up to Insta360, their response was interesting, and it kind of changed my perception a little bit. So one, I think I'm still bummed that it's not removable. I would like to be able to just buy a few just in case. But they did say, when it's non-removable, it is more waterproof, like the whole camera itself is more waterproof. But they also asked me a very interesting question when they said, how many times have you scratched a lens and needed to swap out the lens cover? To which my answer was actually Zero. I've always had extra lens covers for my GoPro and for my DJI, but I've never scratched the lens or broken it in a way where I was like, oh, I have to swap that out. Like never, I've scraped like the sides of it. Like if I slam or fall down or drop the camera, sometimes I scrape the sides, but I've never swapped one out. But I do still see that as an issue and something that could happen for people that either drop it or like a rock jumps up and hits that there. And Insta360's response to that is a 1 year free lens swap for you if anything happens. So for 1 year from the time that you purchase this camera, you can send your camera in and be like, hey, I scratched it or I broke the lens, please fix for me. And they will do that for you. But for $36, they have a care program, which I think no matter which of these cameras you buy, you should buy this company's care program because it's an action camera and the chances of you breaking it or breaking the screen is high. And Insta360's version of their care warranty system is total accidental coverage on this camera for $36. If anything happens to this camera, you break the screen, like you did something, it was your fault entirely, you send it to them, they send it back to you, fixed or replaced if that's what they needed to do. But that's $36 and they pay shipping in the free version where like they'll swap out your lens cover if something happens, you have to pay shipping both ways. So I think paying $36 just makes sense if you're gonna spend this much money on a camera. Totally worth it. A ton of other people asked about that too. Is Leica lens user replaceable? Okay, sensor size. This was an interesting one because Lane Anderson said, good comparisons, just one thing, the Ace Pro doesn't have the same sensor size as the DJI Action 4. They're the same physical size, but the Ace Pro has an 8K sensor, clarity, image, zoom, and the DJI Action 4 sensor is 4K. Incorrect. Lane Anderson. The sensors in these two cameras are from the same manufacturer, the same factory. They are literally the exact same sensor. There's something called pixel binning where you take an 8K sensor and you take every 4 pixels and you make them act like 1 pixel. And what that does is it gives you better image quality and it helps you in low light, which is what the DJI Action 4 is doing and what the Ace Pro is doing. So when these cameras are shooting at 4K, they're taking an 8K sensor and they're taking every 4 pixels, making it 1, which makes it 4K. What Ace Pro is allowing you to do in their 8K mode and in their clarity zoom mode is they're allowing you to basically not pixel bin. So while in those modes, you're reading out the sensor pixel for pixel. And that's why also in action scenarios or in low light scenarios, they don't suggest using 8K. And also why like they're not pushing this camera as like 8K action camera. Like that's not how all their marketing is, because they know that the image quality is technically better in 4K on this camera. So yes, it has the capability of shooting 8K, but you should usually shoot this camera in 4K, just like you shoot this camera in 4K. And then the times when you need extra resolution, you want to punch in on a shot, it's better to do it on this camera than it is this camera, because this camera digitally zooms that, and this camera takes away the pixel binning so that you get the full resolution. Which also unpacks the Insta360 Ace Pro is the first 8K action camera. Not the best review. Where's the resolution review? There it was right there. Okay, Timothy Harper 4170. Hey, great video question. Does it have an option to see the live video while recording from your smartphone if you don't want to use the remote? Yes, just like both of these cameras now, if you are using the app and you hit record, you can see the preview within the app while you're recording the video. The Hero, like the Hero 9, 10, 11, they couldn't do that. And then the 12, now they can. The Action series, you can always do that. And all the Insta360 cameras, you've always been able to do that. Good question. Gnarly Dork. On the widest setting, does the DJI have the widest view? Need to confirm as this will influence my purchase. Yes, the Action 4 has, this is actually kind of a complicated answer. Okay, the Action 4 has the widest field of view, like it goes the widest, and then GoPro can go the tallest because of that 8x7 sensor. But both of these cameras have a 4x3 sensor mode, which if you just double that, it's 8x6. So these guys are 8x6, this one's 8x7. And the idea being that you're gonna chop a 9x16 frame or a 16x9 frame out of the same footage. So this guy kind of has that 8x7 mode so that you can do that really easily. And then the Action 4, like they really want you to turn your camera. They give you a cage when you buy the camera. I don't know where it is because I don't use it, but they give you a cage that this thing can go in that gives you a vertical mount. So if you're gonna shoot vertically with this thing, you put it in the vertical mount and you shoot vertical with it. And with this guy, they have something called FreeFrame mode. And FreeFrame mode is actually pretty trick because it's shooting a 4x3 image, but on screen you can put grid lines for 9x16 and 16x9, so you can look at your frame as you're framing something. And if you see that 9x16 thing there and you're talking like this and the product you're talking about or something that you're showing is over here, you can kind of go like this and make sure that it's within that 9x16 frame. Now that free frame footage, you then bring into the app and you can adjust everything. With that file, you can export it as a 9x16 this way, you can export it as a 16x9 this way, you can change the stabilization, you can change the field of view in post. FreeFrame mode is a very clever feature on this. And then in dewarp mode, like when you put these two cameras both in like wide but dewarped, then the Ace Pro is wider than the Action 4. And then Neon Croatia says, I'd buy it today if it had a wider lens and inner GPS. None of these cameras have inner GPS. All these camera manufacturers realize that putting GPS inside the camera is just a battery drain. And if you get rid of it, you can extend battery times and overheating times. So none of these cameras have internal GPS. This one has an external GPS option. This one has that super dope remote control where you can live preview your shot from it and give you GPS. And then this can also hook up to my Apple Watch so that my Apple Watch gives it the GPS and speed and altitude data. And I think Garmin, Apple Watch and Garmin. HK SAR 55 says a massive smackdown to GoPro, a positive evolution for action cameras. Yes. Skinbone says 10-bit or 8-bit, and then Datboy Video says log profile and ND filters available. Okay, 8-bit versus 10-bit. This is another interesting subject on this camera because it was one of the first things that I asked, like, is it shooting 10-bit? No, it's shooting 8-bit, but it's shooting 8-bit HDR at a higher bit rate. So this guy shoots 120 megabytes per second. The bit rate on this guy is 130 megabytes a second, and the bit rate on this thing is 170 megabytes per second. And again, it's because this is shooting HDR in those 30 frames and below modes, so you actually don't need 10-bit when you're shooting HDR at 170 megabytes per second. Now there is no log profile on this. Both of these can shoot log profiles and 10-bit, and that's really where 10-bit comes in. Like 10-bit comes in when you wanna start pushing colors around. Like when you look at an image like this and I go, I want that blue to be a totally different color. In 8-bit footage, that's super difficult to like really stretch things. But yes, I would love to see 10-bit on this camera. I hope that comes in a future firmware update. Like I think that would be awesome, but with the HDR, you don't see banding in the sky. Like that's one thing that you see in 8-bit versus 10-bit is like the blue skies, like in the gradient, there's banding. But because this is shooting HDR, there's not banding. So it's a weird, like if you're looking to shoot and then not change the image too much, like you like how the camera shoots, you like what the image looks like, you're gonna do some small edits, like this is insane. And then if you're looking to shoot in like a super flat log profile, you wanna do all your own color grading, that's where these two guys come in. Barry P says, nifty, particularly the pause feature, but until Insta or DJI bring a hindsight feature, seems like a simple firmware add, both their offerings are useless to me. Looks like you are kayak fishing. This has pre-recording. 15-second and 30-second pre-recording. All I do, swipe down from the top, I tap pre, that starts my recording and starts my pre-recording timer. That builds up to 15 or 30 seconds. And then as soon as I hit the record button, I get from the moment that I hit record and on and 15 or 30 seconds before I hit the record button. That is what Barry is talking about. And yes, the Ace Pro has that. Markow Fred Malik, I can't say these names. He said, what about a stabilization comparison? Now I didn't do a stabilization comparison because they're all like so stupidly good now, but for you guys, here is a stabilization comparison. But stabilization on these cameras, it's just gotten so good now that between the Action 4, the Ace Pro, the Go, like stabilization is not what you need to worry about. It's going to look smooth, pretty much no matter what you do. Here is a ridiculous stabilization test, though, holding a tripod with 3 cameras on it. I'm not even wearing running shoes, I'm wearing just skate shoes. So this is not going to be stable. But if I run with these 3 cameras, can you tell that one is less stable or more stable than the others? This is really hard to run with a tripod and 3 cameras. I bet all my neighbors think I'm crazy. Was that as ridiculous as it felt while I was doing it? I hope so. Mountain Bike XC says, the one thing I like about the GoPro 12 is the 1/4-20 mount in the bottom. GoPro mount all in one without needing adapters. Does that magnetic mount have both in one? No, it has just a magnetic mount, but it's so much better. Like, they do have the quick release mount, like this little bit just slaps on there. And yes, now I have the GoPro feet and I have 1/4-20, but when I don't have that, I can hop from magnetic mount to magnetic mount incredibly quickly and incredibly easy. I can pop that back off and I can lock that back on. I promise you, if you try a camera with magnetic mount for like a few days, you will not go back to thumb screws. Even though Jackie19er says, make a test how strong the magnetic mount is compared to thumb screw, and I bet you're light-skinned, whoa, that the thumb screw wins. Jackie19er. Aggressive. Maybe I should make a whole video on this whole magnetic mount thing. People think that this is a magnetic mount. It is not a magnetic mount. You've been misled by the marketing. This mount is not magnetic, and this mount, not magnetic. And if you want to see me explain that in a whole video, I will. So to you and to Traverse ADV, it's an action camera. It doesn't need a magnetic mount. It needs a secure mount so it doesn't go walkabout. GoPro's made for surf. Buttons on a mount will all be pressed when water pressure, no matter how secure that mount may. No, okay. Okay, I might need to make a whole video just on this magnetic mount thing. I promise you, GoPro will do, mark my words, if it's not the GoPro 13, it'll be the GoPro 14. They will have a magnetic mount on a GoPro. I guarantee it's too good. It's too good not to. It would be crazy for GoPro to not implement that into their camera on the 13 or 14. Mark it. Mark my words.